The coronavirus outbreak has resulted in the cancellation of thousands of events, gigs, concerts, festivals, meetups, and conferences. Are waves of pandemic the new normal for the foreseeable future? And if so, will social distancing become a regular factor of our personal and professional lives? What could this all mean for the future of the events business? My name is Oisin Lunny, a professor of UX-driven business at Barcelona Technology School, a module leader at the International Music Business School, senior contributor to Forbes, and an event and podcast host and speaker. Today, I am joined by a panel of leading experts and innovators in the field of entertainment, technology, and events to discuss what is the future of live events, from holograms to the holodeck. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome to this very special webinar hosted by the good people at the Social Broadcasting Company, our esteemed panel of VIP guests. So I'm going to start from my left and move to the right, starting with you, Ted Cohen from Tag Strategic and Media Tech Ventures, Muki Kulhan from Muki International, and much more, Scott Cohen from the Warner Music Group, John Textor from Fubo TV, and Nathan Newman from the Social Broadcasting Company, our esteemed hosts. Welcome all to this very special virtual panel, and thank you for joining us. I would like then to invite all of you to give a brief introduction to your own brilliant work and your overlap with events, entertainment, music, conferences, etc. Starting with your good self, Mr. Ted Cohen.
How far back do you want me to go?
Oh, all the way back, my friend.
Okay, so I started out, I was at Warner Records, where Scott is now, which is the greatest record company in the world, the greatest music group in the world, seriously. I was in artist development, touring with bands. I ended up in Chicago during CES in 1977 and was in a hotel room, and one of these serendipitous Zelig experiences. These two homeless looking guys with straggly hair and torn jeans and torn t-shirts walked in with a little round zipper case, and they unzipped it. And they said, "This is the Apple I computer. It's going to change the world." And that's how I met Woz and Steve Jobs and got to know them. Warner owned Atari, and I started hanging out with the Atari folks. That led to the last almost 40 years in working in the crossover between music and technology. How do we get fans closer to the music, and how do we get musicians more and more tools that they can experiment with? So fast forward, and I think Scott in Oisin, I think you know him too, a guy named Mark Cantor.
Yes.
So Mark Cantor, creative director. He created Macromedia. I signed him at Philips Media to a CD-ROM deal. We were in MIT in Boston. We went over in Cambridge. We went over to a place called Cybersmith in Harvard Square, and they had a Jaron Lanier VR pod with the helmet, and you were playing Space Ace, Don Bluth's Space Ace with a lightsaber. And that was my first, that was 94. And I got intrigued by VR. So when people these days go, "Have you seen VR?" I go, 90, yeah, about 25 years ago. I think I'm interested what everybody thinks about, are we at the tipping point, whether that it's ready for prime time, or is it still for the cool kids or the early adopters?
Very good points. Thank you, Ted. There's this great meme doing the rounds of LinkedIn at the moment, which asks the question, what is the greatest driver of innovation in your company? Is it your CEO, your CXO, your CTO, or COVID-19? So we'll come back to this point here, where COVID-19 is actually pushing a lot of innovation in the entertainment and events industry. Cheers, Ted. Over to you, my good friend, Muki.
Hi, everyone. My name is Muki Kulhan. I'm an executive cross-platform immersive producer and innovation R&D strategist and producer as well. My background is actually music journalism, and I worked at MTV for a couple of years. You can see my shiny gold disc. It's actually an award for swearing, believe it or not. My vulgarity and dedication after the first 5 years.
I'd expect nothing less. That's good.
Right. And I was in my MTV days, I was in such the best place at the right time. In the late 90s, launching all the websites and anything MTVI and interactive, red button stunts, apps, live streaming. My first live stream was 1999 in Ibiza with Sonique and Artful Dodger. Beat that one, folks.
Awesome.
Probably about 4 of us watching it. Me, the manager, and the lawyer, scratching out.
What was the exact date? What was the date?
I'm not going that far back. It was Ibiza, you know, a bit fuzzy. But was able to kind of like see the digital space change and how fans get music and participate in the events and interact with things. And then after a space of time, I left to start my own production company and cross-platform and strategy company. So I'm kind of dipping in and out of very large scale music and tech related events like digital producer for The Voice, to working with a lot of tech startups and innovation in VR and AR and XR. And my first AR project was about 9 years ago, but ultimately that kind of virtual space and interaction probably was definitely happening in the 90s and the O's as well. And I'll be right back while you finish introducing everyone else.
Okay, marvelous. Thank you so much, Muki, one of the absolute early adopters of VR and AR. Over to you, my friend Scott Cohen. Tell us a bit about your path and where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, in one way, it's simple. 20-something years ago, I started The Orchard back in the mid-90s, and then retired and ended up a couple of days later as the Chief Innovation Officer at Warner Music Group. Oh, by the way, Oisin, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So whoever might be logging into this, hopefully it's more than that stream in 1999, because it did surprisingly sell out. You added more tickets and another batch sold out. But
this is his birthday party.
It's good to
birthday, yes.
Yeah, if they can't sing, they should at least grab a drink. And
I'm all for that. But I will be DJing later this evening. Come to twitch.tv/Oisin Lunny from around 9 CET, and I'll be playing a few tunes and having a drink. So all are welcome. All are welcome. Thank you very much, Scott. That's a great story. I'm sure there's more details than that. So moving over to you, John Textor from the newly christened Fubo TV.
Great, thank you. Yeah, like many of us, I'm not sure I know you all well enough to say this, but I've had extreme ADD most of my life. I have enjoyed not having to focus on one thing for too long. I love to sort of glorify that by saying I'm a non-linear thinker, which is a way of explaining my strange behavior. I didn't intend to be in the virtual reality space. I was in the early internet enabling kind of space in the mid-90s. I'm thrilled that Al Gore came along and invented the internet, because that gave me a future. Along the way, companies like Art Technology Group, one of the very first personalization companies, you can blame them for those obnoxious little cookies that you see. Virtual Bank, one of the very first internet banks, started that with Bill Gates actually as our first big customer and shareholder. Virtual reality, I guess Vermal, you know, when I met you, Ted Cohen, years ago, I consumed the Kool-Aid with everybody else in sort of seeing the depth of the internet and how virtual worlds could be made more practical. So Vermal, virtual reality markup language, is what we were talking about back then. Along the way, I bounced back and forth between immersive entertainment and traditional entertainment. My college roommate became a major film director, and so ended up in the visual effects space, buying Jim Cameron's company Digital Domain, to, you know, some success and, you know, decent amount of failure as well, as that sort of industry kind of evolved. But I think digital humans and character-driven entertainment is the thing that sort of excited me the most. You know, this quest to create the first sort of CG human that was authentic and believable, you know, with Benjamin Button, that led to Tron, to Tupac, to Michael Jackson. So I've enjoyed character-driven entertainment. I detest the idea of being called the hologram guy. I think that digital likeness is for the living, not just the late. And although, you know, we'll see. But I love character-driven entertainment. I believe that technology is important, but IP lasts forever. And so I try to stay, you know, within that space with FaceBank and now with Fubo TV.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, John. IP lasts forever. What a good thing to remember. And last but by no means least, Nathan Newman, tell us a bit about your fantastic career and how you ended up at the social broadcasting company.
Oh, thank you. That's too kind. So my name is Nathan Newman. A little bit like John. I'm a non-linear corkscrew thinker as well, so I've had a little bit of a mixed career. With SBC, Social Broadcasting Company, I'm in the position of strategy director, and SBC is essentially a collective that came together during the lockdown because we had, between myself and a bunch of other companies, a lot of expertise that dipped into the realm of virtual, either by way of data science or user experience design or content delivery and production, all the way through to gamification. And realized we needed to kind of bring all these forces together so that we could put on events like the event that we're doing today. My background, like I said, is very mixed. So for the last 15 years, I've been in a mixture of media and entertainment, marketing, technology, immersive technology. And I've had a lot of fun along the way. And what that essentially allows me to do is to dip into those different verticals and draw from different industries, different skill sets to try and put together solutions and ideas which are a little bit more outside the box, although I hate the term outside the box.
The phrase outside the box is always very welcome as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much, Nathan. So just to get the conversation rolling, I'm wondering, Ted, Cohen, if you could, you've seen a lot of these things when they were, early doors on new technology with bringing entertainment to the masses in new ways. If social isolation is part of this new normal with COVID-19 coming back in waves, hopefully we'll have a remedy at some stage, and we won't all be in lockdown. But is this kind of helping technology to reach more people on a global scale? And what technologies do you think will be part of this new normal?
Well, what's interesting is a lot of the things that people are discovering right now, like Zoom, for one.
Yeah.
Zoom's been around for at least half a dozen years, and they went from 20 million users to 200 million users overnight. They're having some scaling issues, and hopefully we'll have a Zoom bomber here somewhere. But going back, in my career, I ended up at EMI in the early 2000s, and companies would come in to see me and they'd show me something. We're the first person to ever do this, and I'm going, well, what about Oisin's company? Who's he? Well, he's doing exactly what you're doing, and he didn't seem to know you exist. So there's a lot of people that have been woodshedding. You've got Stage It that Evan Lowenstein has been doing for years. Evan Lowenstein went from doing $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month to he had a $100,000 day last week. So a lot of people are looking at a lot of stuff now, some of it that's been around for a while, and some people that are coming to the party. And people are now going, I don't know if I like Zoom the best, maybe StreamYard is better. But as we look at VR and AR, and early efforts, and Muki, I'm sure you saw this, in around 99, there was a company called Worlds.net that was run by a guy named Tom Kidron out of Boston, and a guy named not Steve Greenberg from the record business, but another Steve Greenberg. Anyway, it was clunky, it was slow to render, but the idea of wandering around a virtual world, at the time we were building Elton John world and Bon Jovi world and Aerosmith world. And the question was, do people have the spare time? Or were we building stuff that we only liked because we were so into it? Yeah. As this guy Carlos, and I can't remember his last name, maybe Scott knows his last name. Carlos at Universal Music Group said to me one day, he says, the problem is we're all into creating things that we think are the coolest things in the world, and we don't realize that most people just either want to listen to music, watch music, but they don't necessarily want to do the deep dive that we do. So what's happened now with this isolation, people have a lot of time to noodle with stuff, and if we can get in front of them with things like Muki's Quest, or I've got a Valve Index system here at home. I met some kids. I'll finish here. Everybody on this call knows I talk a lot. I met a guy at a thing called Dreamland XR in Vegas during CES. One of the big problems with VR at home is one person is wearing the headset and everybody else may be watching a monitor seeing what they're seeing, but they're not involved. Him and his friends built an app that allows everyone in the room to interact with the person wearing the headset. So it goes from being an insular experience to a social experience. So now when people get to play with things like that right now, we literally do have a lot of free time on our hands to look at things that somebody sent you a link to and you go, oh, that's cooler than I thought it would be. So it actually is, you know, with all the negative that may come out of it in terms of economic upheaval, there is a time here to take a breath and just appreciate the creativity and the ingenuity of a lot of people.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to jump in, you know, to back that up, you know, a lot of this technology has existed for a long time and it's been worked on. We're talking for some of it for decades.
Right.
But now with this COVID-19 disruption, is this doing to the live industry what the Napster disruption did to the recorded music industry? Like, recorded music industry was going along just fine, and then outside forces, as in illegal downloading, happens. And it's like, fuck, how are we going to adapt to this new environment? What do we need to do? So now COVID-19 comes into the picture, completely disrupts the entire touring industry. Is this their Napster moment to say, all right, how are we going to adapt to this? How are we going to change how we operate, and what things are now going to stick? You know, what's going to go beyond this lockdown period?
I think it also gives companies that have been trying this technology for such a long time the chance to jump in and go, hey, try this, use this. Those like the mini Napsters. But that's why it's such an exciting time right now, where you know, people do have the time and the curiosity more than anything. And it's that psychology also of being apart but together, you know. So you've got those those types of VR experiences, like the music concerts and the bank heists and escape rooms and those kind of things, where you can get involved in the same room, but then also you're in Spain, you know, my cousin in Chicago, you can have multiple people in the same room at the same time. And
what you know, what's interesting is though, is like you take a company like LiveX Live, and you know, whether they're an interesting company, but they've been doing live. You know, when I got a note from them one day saying, log on real quick, we're doing Bruce Springsteen live from Spain, I went, this is real. In terms of if they could get John Lando or Bruce Springsteen to agree to a live broadcast from Barcelona, this was real. It still never got big enough until the last few weeks. The real disruption, I know we're here to talk about music. I have been working also in digital distribution for film for a long time. And I have been all about this day and date. Why can't we, you know, even if the multiplex is across the road, do you really want to sit with those people? How's that sound? I would pay 20, 30 bucks to watch a movie at home rather than pay $15 across the road. They said it would never happen. It would never happen. In the last 3 weeks, you had the Trolls movie, Invisible Man. You got these movies where all of a sudden the theater, the movie studios are releasing for home first run because there's nowhere else to go. So at every point, and Scott, everybody on this call can back it up. Everything we were ever told, we'll never support MP3. We'll never let people have all access to all the music they want. We'll never do television as a subscription. Those walls have all slowly fallen down, and now we're seeing a waterfall of changes in, well, maybe we could do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Brilliant point. I like the idea that this, you know, there's good creative things coming out of this crisis, and people have more time to engage with these new entertainment technologies. But coming back to you, Scott Cohen, I'm just curious if you think, you mentioned it's perhaps the Napster moment for the live music industry. How can the industry ensure that you know, musicians and producers are benefiting from the changes that are happening very quickly in the digital domain?
Well, you know, I actually do think there's many ways they are benefiting. I mean, yeah. This notion that they're able to connect directly with their audiences in ways that they weren't before, like Songkick Live is organizing all these gigs, and it's like, wow, or Charlie XCX's Lockdown, or Neil Young's Fireside, you know.
Brilliant.
or the festivals like Warner Music Spain did a festival with 23 artists playing and just connecting with their fans in ways that, it's funny, it's online yet seems intimate. And honestly, my all-time favorite was a week or two ago when Dua Lipa did the Late Late Show with James Corden. If you haven't seen that, did a live performance, fucking brilliant. I mean, had she just done, on normal television, it would have been cool and interesting. But this forced some creativity, and it's like brilliant. How she had backing dancers on different screens, and it was like, wow, super cool.
I mean, that's forced, that shifts over into the broadcasting industry, which is my other vertical of how, it's not an adapt or die. It's like, you better do this or you will die. Finding ways to stay on air and stay alive and keep your head above water is what the whole world is doing right now. But especially in the broadcasting, you see every single chat show is doing the remote thing to stay on air as best you can.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tangent, perhaps, but one of the things which, sorry, it's maybe a bit of a tangent. One of the things which I've been quite a advocate of speaking about with people over the last couple of weeks is that during this lockdown, one of the first things that sprang to my mind for some reason was the SAS, because they have this age-old adage of improvise, adapt, overcome. And the act of improvisation, I think, is something which has a lot of anchoring to the idea of musicians and artists, but really in neuroscience terms, we are all creative by doing something and putting two things together. So what we are seeing across the planet is this wave of improvisation that's provoking people to be more creative so that they can adapt to this new environment, this new kind of social soup that we're swimming in because of this pandemic. And we're seeing these wonderful ways that people are overcoming the pandemic and essentially flipping at the bird and saying, it doesn't matter what's going on over there, we can still be who we are. And I think that's a really interesting link back into identity and how maybe identities are forming differently because we are socially disconnected and we're reconnecting in these new and wonderful ways.
That's a great point, and I'd like to bring in John Textor at this stage, because you mentioned the idea of identities and our digital identities, and John, through your work at FaceBank and now at Fubo TV, could you talk to us a bit about our familiarity and our comfort level with having a digital identity, the role of FaceBank in this, and where do you think this is going to move as we kind of come out of this kind of period of isolation, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed characters. I've enjoyed likeness, and I like thinking about how content is going to look 2-3 years from now. And I know all of us on this call do. It's rare that my kids come into the room and say, "Hey, Dad, I want to show you this clip of Modern Family." They're always showing me something else, and the technology, the dance between technology and art, and which may lead the other, I think art always wins. All these sort of neat things that we've come up with, virtual worlds or headsets or flat screens, which I think are the most immersive thing in the world when you're sitting on a couch with your friends. It's always getting back to the core of this. It was mentioned a moment ago on creative. It's about the poet, it's about the filmmaker, it's about the musician, it's about the writer. And we as technologists are trying to develop these really cool ways to connect people with that art, that purity, and with each other. And, as we're all disconnected now and we're all sitting in other parts of the world, we have this even greater opportunity to connect to this sort of the pure emotion that art or content can give us. We can be made to cry if we're open to it without, the goggles on or the couch full of friends. And so I think where the digital likeness thing comes in for me, why I care about it, is I look at my history, Ted's history, the path from virtual worlds to characters on screen, and we're going to keep meeting humans, and they're not always going to be made of flesh and blood. They're going to be digital representations of bots, of entertainers, of ourselves. It's not as good as the couch with your friends. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about all the contraptions I bought for my kids to have more immersive experiences in video games. And they always take the headsets and the headphones off. And the immersive experience that we've been trying to build for them in VR and games is not as immersive as them sitting there and enjoying each other. So I do think we've got these challenges right now. How do we enjoy each other? And some of these technologies like Zoom and others are connecting us in ways that we didn't anticipate we would need only a few months ago. But for me, I don't want to get too psychotic about digital humans taking over the world. I do think when you talk to Siri, Alexa, you know, they'll have a face. The math teacher will be AI, teaching perfect math will be digital, because you can't get a math teacher in certain parts of China or something. But I think, you know, sometimes we get too impressed with ourselves as technology people, thinking that we're leading this charge. Really what we're trying to do is we're leapfrogging life, and then technology life then leapfrogs us, and we're just sort of growing together and going forward together. And I'm so glad, Scott, you're on the phone, because at Warner, you know this, content has always been king. And, you know, you look at the roadkill of our technology past, all the ways that we used to get that content that don't even exist today. AOL was a chat space, but man, did it connect us, right? It doesn't even exist anymore. And so that's why, you know, we say we're a technology-driven IP company, because technology is ephemeral, obsolescence risk is extreme, but, you know, IP, people, ideas, poetry, music, these things are what matter forever. And we're just trying to see the next
I
way.
love what you're saying with that, because it is all about artists and music and emotion. But what I love about technology is it sparks new ways of expressing yourself. So that's where the beauty of it comes, that what artists are going to go into a VR environment and go, nah, let me show you how to do it. Let me, you know, if Pink Floyd were 20 years old today and they had, you know, Oculus Quest, what would they create instead of Dark Side of the Moon? What would
Jim
they
Morrison,
do in that
right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Jim
Jim
Morrison.
Morrison of the Doors.
Right.
But you know, Scott, I mean, at the core, Scott, we end up, the first thing is we're providing connectivity. I mean, one of the good things that's come out of this is you're seeing Chris Martin acoustic, you're seeing Garth Brooks acoustic, you're seeing people where the song, the voice, the composition, everything, that's the core of it. Really quickly, I saw Michael Bublé a few years ago, and there were strings and horns and dancers. But the very last song, he put the mic down, took the earphone, took the in-ears off, walked to the edge of the stage. They turned the house lights on, and he sang "Song for You," Leon Russell a cappella. That killed everything else he did previously that night. Him singing a cappella to the audience made more of a connection than all the strings, drums, horns, percussion. So getting to see, you know, Chris Martin on Saturday Night Live the other night, just, you know, doing "Shelter from the Storm" by Bob Dylan, I thought was stunning. So what we do enhances the artist experience, but it has to start with the story. It has to start with the song. It has to start with the artist. And we either dress them up or we let them be as naked as they want to be.
Can I say one last thing about IP on this? It's sort of central to our sort of approach. I do believe that technology and the way that we're engaging, and the reason we're focused on face, you know, we're all turning on our phones. Our phone is looking at us, it's scanning our face. The mathematical representation of our face and our likeness is now, it's at Apple or it's somewhere else. And, you know, we think that should be protected, of course, but it's an opportunity to see the inversion of the world of IP. We used to think IP was looking at the celebrity on the screen, on stage. And yeah, Floyd Mayweather fighting Sugar Ray Leonard, which we're doing, is going to be great. But the largest IP portfolio I've ever contemplated is 2 billion consumers that are now engaging their likeness in their apps, downloading them into video games, using digital greeting cards of their likeness, simple emojis, or personal productivity, using their face to get onto airplanes. So when the intellectual property becomes the user, and that's what I love about Tron, that movie, it's all about the user, right? Now you're talking about 2 billion people sort of engaging, using their likeness and engaging in content, celebrity-driven, user-driven. Now they are the IP, the consumer is, along with the celebrity. And I don't know what that says for the entertainment industry, because the celebrities are still better at it than consumers are. There's a reason they're the best writers, storytellers, artists. They're just better at connecting with their emotions and conveying it than the average consumer is. But I love that we're all in the game now. We are all
Billie
IP.
Eilish recorded an album in her bedroom that won most of the awards this past year.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't done. Most of it was not done in a studio. Most of it was done in their home.
Yeah, the creative artists will always find a way to be creative because that's what they do
Right.
instinctively and subconsciously and subliminally. It doesn't matter how many headsets or devices, mobile phones, anything that's coming out. If it's not for a fan, if it's not an engaging experience, it's something that they get excited about and makes them feel something, then there's no point of having the best devices in the whole world if there's not a good experience to go with that. And that's
and going back to, sorry. No, and about the artist and the technology, you know, every time you give an example, it's Chris Martin from Coldplay, it's Michael Bublé, it's Jim Morrison of the Doors, it's what they did with technology. It's what Jimi Hendrix did with the electric guitar. It wasn't what everyone else did. It's like, give that technology to him, watch what he can fucking produce out of that thing.
But in a real quick sound bite, I say to people whenever they talk about, you know, how about a VR album package, a 360-degree whatever. It's sort of like we can do a session on, yes, I know Bjork has done one. Now what do the rest of us do? And you have these beacons of creativity.
But what artists will choose the route that they want to take without thinking it, because how many artists do we know you go to a label or whatever meeting you're going to, and they're forced to be trying to do, or information is coming their way and it's just no, block. But if you just like let people have space to breathe, and that's including us as humans as well. And you were touching on all the I love all the talk about the avatars and our digital identities, which is so important. And it's about our digital identity is so important to us, and it's about being democratized, but it's still not real. And that's almost what makes it more appealing, that it's not you, it's a fake you, it's an image in your likeness or a vision of your likeness, and you can get away with more.
Right.
Well, I mean, Twitter is a great.
That's assuming whatever digital identity that you're chatting to is what they appear to be.
Twitter is mostly fake accounts, right?
You need to touch on that security issue and what happens with your data and things like that too, because it's now like people just go, yep, click accept. You mentioned your cookies and things like that.
Yeah, well, you know, the Face app a few months ago managed to get everybody so excited about seeing what they look like with a beard on. Before they knew it, they had 150 million faces that scanned up, not realizing that they had agreed to a royalty-free license in perpetuity on their likeness and all the photos in their phone. So we have blockchain to sort of prevent that kind of thing from.
And if people just want to know about what beard to have, they just go to, it's called COVID lockdown beards, but don't worry.
You notice, I'm one of the few that tried cutting his own hair in this COVID crisis. I won't try that again.
Is it Nathan? Just wanted to come back to you for a second. You know, we've kind of spoken about, innovating around live events, music events, etc. But what about conferences? I mean, you at the social broadcasting company produce a lot of virtual events where people are dialing in like this and joining panels. Do you think the events industry is at the risk of, death by Zoom being the new death by PowerPoint? And how can we avoid this?
Yeah, I think death by Zoom is certainly what's happening, and the word webinar is turning into a little bit of a dirty word because everyone's doing a webinar. Everybody in the events industry is essentially trying to copy paste what they would do in the physical world and take it into the virtual world. It doesn't quite work because there's a different set of skills that you need to have and a different mindset to be able to try and translate something or to back engineer it from the medium where the message is coming from. So what is interesting is that everyone, or a lot of people, are becoming broadcasters, but what everyone's noticing is that not everybody's ready to be a broadcaster yet. They need more training. They need to think more about what kind of content are they putting together, but also what's the context of that content. So if we take the panel today, it's live. Live is something that represents, like I said before, social connection to people who are socially disconnected right now. And live provides immediacy and importance, and not just connection, but this ability to be more open to experiences because something's happening in the moment. So when you start to kind of look at all those things from the perspective of a virtual conference, it's really important to think about immersion, because in my view, especially from my work in immersive technology. What that kind of taught me the most was that immersion isn't just about immersive technology. You know, immersion is walking around outside. It's the experience that you have and how that experience turns into your perception. And there's all these different factors and components that can form the basis of what constitutes something to be immersive. So in the Michael Bublé example before, there's a real juxtaposition between all this noise and all this fanfare, and then all of that being stripped away so that all the focus and attention was cognitively funneled on the one guy with one voice. That's really immersive without putting on a headset. And you can start to think about immersion. You know, I like the term mobile first from years ago, or social first. I think if we start thinking about conferences as immersive first experiences, and we think about the emotional design of that experience, and we start thinking about the touch points and the connections that you have with your audience. There's something that I heard Chris Hardwick from the Nerdist podcast years ago say, which really stuck in my mind, which was that when people listen to a podcast, they're plugging it into their brain because they're taking earbuds and they're dropping them right into their ear canal. So if your sound is terrible, if the way in which you're speaking is exhausting, then your audience is going to get exhausted, and you've mainlined your voice right into their brain, you know? So why would you produce content, or why would you not give enough attention to audio or your presentation skills, and just set up a webinar and fire people in the direction of it and say, there you go, that's an event, it's done.
Conversation is immersive as well. I mean, sorry, Ted, and really great points that Nathan had. I mean, Oisin, and Scott, like we all do conferences. I think I had like 12 cancel and 4 keynotes. You know, the point of the conference is about going to meet people in person. And
that's what I was going to say is, how do we solve the networking issue?
It's about like being with people physically, having a beer with them, not talking shop. You will meet new people. Sometimes you connect with people, and then you kind of take it back into that virtual space. But I think, Nathan, like that's where probably, you know, everyone on this session here is, you know, we've had to find ways to reconnect with people as if we are really there. The video thing is nice because it's great to see everybody's faces, and we're all having like our virtual pub quizzes and pubs and rooms and things like that, but it still doesn't replace a couple hundred people in a room together and Oisin DJing.
You're very kind.
Like, when people go to conferences, they're going to either learn, to educate, but they're all going to network. And if you can figure out, Nathan, if you can figure out anyone who's watching right now who seem to have like minds because they're interested in ideally what some of us or all of us are talking about, how do we connect them afterwards? What's the equivalent of the happy hour for what we're doing right now? We want to go into the room and talk to 10 people at a time, 5 people at a time.
Yeah.
And
well, we have
create that environment, because this is great, but it's the follow-up where the magic happens, where somebody says, I like what you said, take a look at what I'm doing. I think you could help, either I could help you or you could help me, or we could help each other.
The business cards, the digital business cards and things like that. And
who knows, maybe avatars will have a role.
And I think there's sorry, can I just say one quick thing? I think there's a multitude of solutions, just people haven't rewired their thinking to improvise with the solutions that they have. So some of the things that we're looking at are, asynchronous roundtables where we can have multiple slots and people can plug in, and almost like fishbowl networking style can cycle around, and you can still meet 30 or 100 people throughout the course of a day, and you can do it virtually. It's just a question of people knowing that those types of solutions are there, or more importantly, people being able to, and I think this is a really big one, and it's so simple as well, people being able to find their authentic selves through a webcam. Because if you can find your authentic self and you can communicate yourself through the technology, we were talking about the medium being the message earlier, in lots of different ways. But if you can project through this technology to someone and make that connection, that's the new networking skill. The face-to-face skill is essential, but the way in which that connection happens through this technology is a little bit different, and it takes a lot of practice. And there's kind of social etiquette that's a little bit different, and there's things that you should do and shouldn't do. You know, you shouldn't shout down the microphone. You shouldn't try and talk over people, but we're all excited, so we talk over each other. You know, there's all these little nuances in the communication that I think are the new business development skill.
Nice. And I just wanted to mention, Nathan, at the Social Broadcasting Company, you're offering a free webinar this Friday, the 17th, with former BBC One presenter Andy Johnson. And he's going to tell you how to get broadcast ready. So how to get all the skills you need to have that presence during a webinar or a virtual event, like Nathan is talking about. So visit socialbroadcastingcompany.com for more details. Okay, folks, I'm afraid we're a little bit over time. So I wanted just to give you all the opportunity to maybe throw like 1 or 2 tech predictions into the mix. And, you know, what do you think is going to come out of the situation we're in? What technology are we going to be using and enjoying over the next few months and years, and has this changed? So I'm going to start from my left to right here with you, Ted Cohen.
Again,
Yes.
well, it's funny. Most of you, I think, have run into Ned Sherman over the years from Digital Media Wire, and he had me host a panel on technology with millennials 15 years ago. And I turned to all of them, and as the words came out of my mouth, I realized my mistake. I said, on average, how many hours a week do you all spend on Second Life? And they all looked at me and went, what the hell is Second Life? And I realized they actually had a pretty good first life. They didn't need to be on Second Life. But now there is an opportunity for people. We're in a different time here now. So a lot of the paradigms that we look at, they might be ready for prime time now. So I want to take the moment that I have here to just give you a URL. I'm working with some wonderful people at Wallifornia in Belgium. And we're doing a thing called the nextstagechallenge.org. Scott and I have been there a few times. So it's HTTP, / dot or whatever, nextstagechallenge.org. And it's an initiative to come up with solutions and whatever. I'm going to be one of the mentors, but it's a way to, again, to jumpstart and move some of these ideas forward. So I would encourage everybody to click on that, take a look at it. And I really have loved seeing all of you, reconnecting with Scott and John, and meeting you, Nathan, and Muki. We've got to compare gadgets later.
Well, I notice you have the Spinal Tap thing behind you.
I have Spinal Tap dolls. I have a complete set of Spinal Tap. I quit my job over Spinal Tap. I saw the movie and I reviewed. You have it too. I love it. Do we have 30 more seconds?
Yeah.
Oh
See, no one would do this at a networking event, by the way. Here's my toys.
30 seconds. I quit my job in 1984 after I saw the movie Spinal Tap with Tony Levin and Robert Fripp from King Crimson.
Oh, yeah.
I literally resigned the next morning. A year ago, I got a call from a guy named Stephen Lee in London who works for Harry Shearer, who is Derek Smalls, saying, would you like to work on the, Harry's going to do a concert as Derek Smalls, can you get us a real entertainer? So I ended up working for a member of Spinal Tap, and I delivered Billy Idol to sing Hellhole, and I forget the other two. Anyway, Billy loved it, they loved it, and I went, the career's gone full circle, I'm working for Spinal Tap.
That is just perfect. Perfect, thank you.
Talk, I'll shut up.
Thank you, Ted. Over to you, Muki.
Okay, so we didn't get to do too much of a deep dive into the virtual meetup space. So you're thinking like Engage, Glue, obviously AltSpace VR, you mentioned Second Life, but more and more opportunities are coming up to be meeting in a virtual space and be open-minded to it. It is still, not everyone has these beautiful things, to put on your head. So there's opportunities for web-based VR meetups for you to kind of get used to. But in, remembering that cybersecurity, there's Cyber.XR coalition that I'm a part of. That's all free information to kind of help protect your identity, diversity, inclusion in these second spaces and virtual spaces. It's about remote collaboration. I'm involved with the IBC accelerators, and that's lots and lots of great information, and also with South by Southwest. But I think it is about working together, remote collaboration, exploring new platforms to meet people in, and be open-minded and find those opportunities that you can connect with people in a different way, but overlapping into some of the new technologies like AR and the holographic and haptics will be a little bit more next year and the year on how we meet. So thank you. Good night.
Sweet. Thank you, Muki. Awesome. Over to you, Scott Cohen.
Well, it's a bit more complicated for me because Warner Music Group
Of course. Sorry, dude.
is in the IPO process.
You can skip this question.
Don't hear any predictions from me today because
forward-looking statement.
Lots of people
Right.
in trouble. But with that said, and this isn't a prediction, I'm wondering who's going to be the artist or artists that are going to come shine out of this, that understands the medium, like the artist that understood television. How do you have a camera in front of you and somehow connect, whether it was Elvis or the Beatles, and, fast forward to the MTV era, how did Madonna just so connect in that medium, to the YouTube era of, and YouTubers and TikTokers. So who's going to be the artist or artists that are going to figure this out and shine and say, I got this down?
On a personal level, Scott, how are you using you have internal connectivity. How do you use it?
What do you mean? Oh, that's a whole nother. We're not opening up that can of worms now.
Okay, I figured you could talk that. You can talk about it. Okay.
That's our next webinar. Thank you, Scott. Over to you, John Textor. Thank you.
I want to take off on something Scott said, because I think he's really spot on. Technology, gives tools to the artist or the consumer, the person who wants to express themselves. And I think the first time I saw a Pixar film, it was Toy Story. And suddenly animation looked different. It had texture, it had God rays in the light. It didn't look like anything I'd ever seen in animation. And we saw traditional artists, keyframe animation people, from the early days of Disney, suddenly painting on a Cintiq using, a stylus instead of a paintbrush. And so technology has given the artist and the consumer a different canvas, every so many years, without ever really losing the importance of just the good old-fashioned canvas. So what I really am looking forward to, and I think we're all going to appreciate maybe a little bit more out of this pandemic, is this profound appreciation for the traditional. We're going to want to go to sporting events. We're going to want to see each other. We're not all going to be paranoid, and we're going to get over that. We're going to go to a concert. We're going to just watch somebody on stage that's doing incredible things. We're going to see a football game, regardless of which definition, American or European, you have for football. And technology will be there to help people connect. What do I expect to happen? Yeah, I'd love to say that digital humans are taking over the world and you're going to see them everywhere. And that is true. But simple platforms like what we're looking at now, I mean, this Zoom gallery that I'm looking at looks like the same stack of, webcams that you have in the Brady Bunch intro, right? So simple technologies that bring together beautiful content, either people and our words and our thoughts, or artists, musicians, and poets. That's what we're going to see for the rest of our lives, is different ways to experience each other. And the technologists are just trying to create great tools to sort of make that happen. As Scott pointed out very nicely, what would the great artists of yesteryear have done with today's technology? We know it would be brilliant, right? And consumers are getting into the act too, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, great point. Thank you very much, John. And finally, Nathan, what's your tip for the future?
I think, so I'm going to swerve tech and talk about disciplines. I think there's 4 disciplines which are going to soar. And as a follow on from the last point, I think the revenge of analog is going to be tremendous after everyone comes out of lockdown. And there's a really good book called Revenge of Analog that people should pick up if they're interested in that. I think social science is something that people are going to start to indirectly take a lot of interest in if they aren't already, because they need to understand how to adapt what they're already doing to these virtual spaces and how to build communities. And this level of panic and pandemic is something which really gets people focusing and being interested, even on a consumer level, never mind business level, about how society is structured and what it means to people and what that means for people's identities. So that's the first discipline. The next is gamification. So a really good friend of mine who's been in the video games industry for over 20 years, he jokingly says, give him a potato and he'll gamify it. I think if we're looking at the not just the games industry, but if we're looking at the events industry, gamification is a really great way of building brand equity and brand loyalty. And I think if a lot of events are going to be going virtual, there's going to be a absolute sea change of people in the events industry thinking about gamification in different ways. The next one, broadcasting. I think everyone's going to start thinking of broadcasting in the same way as people did when they first got a social media account and had a phone that had a camera on it, because everyone's going in the direction of live streaming now. And I think that is going to incrementally grow and grow and change and go to some interesting places. And then last but not least, I think outrageous improvisation and creativity are going to absolutely win today. You know, it's those people who aren't necessarily the celebrities that have a lot of access to opportunity. It's the people who don't have a lot of access to opportunity, who improvise and do something that goes viral, that gets deals, and that changes the way in which people look at content. I think that's really going to be quite big over the next 24 months.
Fantastic. What a perfect way to wrap things up. I'm afraid we have run out of time at this stage. I wanted to thank all of you, our brilliant panelists, for joining us to discuss what is the future of live events from holograms to the holodeck. Thank you so much, Ted Cohen, Muki Kulhan, Scott Cohen, Nathan Newman, and John Textor. Thanks to all of you for joining us at home. Please join us in the digital space, your preferred social network, and keep the conversation going. And SBC, Social Broadcasting Company, will be back on Friday with Andy Johnson from the BBC to teach you everything you needed to know about performing in a broadcast style in a virtual world. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy birthday.